Your story reminded me of a woman I met about 10 years ago. Her name was Mary Ann. I'll never forget her. I was doing a project for a company that was selling mortgages, and there was like 100 salespeople in the organization. And I always start my projects the same way. I like to meet the top 5 or 6 performers and just listen to them and find out what they're doing. And I had heard about her because she was not just a little bit better than everybody. She was a lot better than everybody. She had like double and triple the kind of results that everybody else did. So if everybody else was closing $1 million of mortgages on a monthly basis, she was closing 2 or 3 million. I mean, way ahead. So anyway, she was in a room with 3 or 4 other salespeople that I was listening to and kind of doing a roundtable focus group sort of thing. And, I asked questions, what is it that makes you different? How do you create results and all that kind of thing? And, everybody kind of told their story. And then when it came to Mary Ann, her turn to answer the question, she was definitely the superstar in the room. She said, before I answer that question, I'd love to learn from you, Michael. And she started asking me some questions. What have I learned about top performers? What got me into what I'm doing? And she literally listened to me for like 10 minutes. And, after the meeting was over, I came up to her and I said, it was really fascinating. I've done a lot of these focus groups. I've never seen somebody turn it around like that. And she said, well, the reason I do that is I really enjoy listening. I find it's fun for me to listen and hear other people's insights. And it became really obvious to me, that's why she's successful. She finds one of the most important parts about influence, which is listening to others, listening to understand, the Stephen Covey principle. She found that fun. And as a result of that, when you talked to her, you felt this great release of somebody that was really curious and genuinely wanted to know what you had to say and interested in what you had to say. And I think there is this element of, when you're around people, of letting go and listening and being, taking joy in just experiencing others, rather than always having to kind of put yourself out there. There's something about that relates to that mental relief. And good. The reason I'm saying this is that good leaders and good managers, they create meetings and they create celebrations where they're not the star, where the other people are the star, and they're listening to them. And that's part of what creates fun, is that the team itself is celebrating as opposed to just being recognized by someone else. Curious on your take on that.
Well, I think, and this is super cliche, you've heard it a million times over in your career. Oftentimes in organizations, I experience this no matter whether I was an entry-level, mid-level manager, and oftentimes even as a director, we sit and we wait for everybody else to create the culture that we desire. We need leadership to give us the okay that we could be this, that we could do this, that I could wear a Goonie shirt and a bow tie, right? Which, though there are some limitations, there are some lines. But in my experience, as you're waiting for somebody to create your fun for you, you're going to be waiting for a long time. So this change you're referencing, it could come both top down and bottom up, right? Like the young lady that you referenced in this meeting. One of the things that I love about that whole story is, in this fundamentalism concept, we don't just talk theoretically. We really give some specific tactical things that we call fundamentals to help improve organizational culture and the amount of joy, fun, and fulfillment in it, thus impacting every performance key indicator. But key performance indicator. But like you referenced, that is one. Listen with intent. Deliberately listen. We've all had those experiences, Michael, where you're talking to somebody, and in the midst of your point, like you're talking to somebody, and no sooner do you just start moving your mouth, you start to see that quiver lip that they got, their lips are moving. And when their lips are moving, all they want to do is talk. And when they want to talk, they're no longer listening. So in that situation, especially as a leader, it's in that moment where you have to say, time out independently in your own head and say, I'm not getting anywhere right now saying what I'm saying. Let's take a deep breath and stop and say, hey, Michael, it looks like something that I said has kind of created a thought in you. What's going through your mind right now? And now all of a sudden they feel like they're a part of the process rather than you exercising your opinion or your vision of what you want this to look like.
Early in my career, Paul, I was very fortunate. I had an excellent mentor. He was an older guy. I was in my early mid-20s and he was in his 50s. I was living in New York at the time, and he was in St. Louis, and he kind of really became that mentor for me. And right after I met him, he sent me a copy of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Everybody should buy and read that book. It's one of the great books ever written. And Viktor Frankl was a Nazi concentration camp survivor, and he had a kind of a psychology background. And he wrote this book when he came out of it about his experience, and it was an incredibly inspiring book. I mean, you would think it would be very dark and, just from the experience of it. But one of the things that he said that is just so memorable is he said, in the experience of being in that concentration camp, they can take everything away from you, literally everything. You're obviously, you have no possessions and no wealth at all. You have no power. They can take away your relationships by moving you around. They can disorient you. They can do all these different kinds of things. But he said the one thing that you can always create, and that is maybe the greatest craving or the greatest need for everybody, is the desire to be understood by someone else. And when you are understood by another human being, it creates this sense of sort of joy and relief and release. And he said, even in the most dire situations, when you come in contact with other people in that, in that same concentration type environment, when somebody would take the time to listen and understand he said, what a feeling of relief it was. And one of the main themes of the book is just this whole point that we all crave to be understood by someone else. And the person that provides that, as a way of, part of their journey, is that I connect with people, I listen to them, I understand them, I give them an opportunity to express themselves to a person that's curious and that's not judgmental and that's not interrupting them every 30 seconds with what I think and such. I think it creates a kind of environment in an organization where it becomes a learning organization. And I think that's part of the fun factor as well, is that people want other people to express themselves and be themselves. Obviously in a productive sort of way, but they want people to be their authentic selves. And